I think African Union should be dissolved. I think every one of Africa's nations should go home and mind their own business. I think we'll be better off working in blocks and in groups of 3s and 5s with similar economic and political circumstances and interests than these collective numbers which amounts to nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, I think AU is only a charade, a meeting place for old politicians who once in a while wants to meet up and drink together. Ladies and gentlemen, they have no reason meeting in Addis Ababa and therefore need no support from anyone until something significant, ladies and gentlemen, occurs. I genuinely believe what I've said has merit, and I'm going to spend the next segment of this video to defend it. I'm Cyrus, and this is Tuntum Network in Accra, Ghana. Don't forget to subscribe and share the link when you find our content insightful. Let's back this up with facts. Come with me. I will not waste 1 second of your time. And so, here we go. The African Union is sponsored partly by the European Union and NATO and China and stuff like that. Fact. Historically, over 60% of the African Union's total budget, especially for programs and peacekeeping operations, has come from external sources. Fact. The budget of the African Union is therefore subsidized by the international organizations. Fact. The financial contributions of member countries are consistently inconsistent. This has been the case from the very onset, ladies and gentlemen. Some member countries don't pay on time or don't pay in full. Our army is mediocre at best. They are very limited in the supply of ammunition and intel because their budget is insignificant. Therefore, they depend heavily on intel from the military of the international bodies operating in Africa, like AFRICOM. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know how fast Islamic jihadist groups and militias are growing in Africa? I looked at the numbers and I was dumbfounded. The list of Islamic jihadist groups and militias in Africa are more than 13 as the main bodies with dozens of breakoffs. These are some of the common names we have as at now. Boko Haram, ISWAP, bandit groups of Zamfara, ISGS, JNIM, Ansarul Islam, Bozos, M23, Allied Democratic Forces, Codeco, FDLR, CNPSC, and Seleka, Al-Shabaab, Alu-Sunnah wal Jamaa. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a plethora of them. White Army, Oromo, Liberation Army, and so on and so forth, with many of the religious groups, extremist groups, leading back to the same source, ISIS. There are so many of them, I lose count. And every day new branches and breakups are adding up. What is going to happen in the next decade in Africa when the numbers grow alongside their reach and access to more funding? Ladies and gentlemen, clearly if you as a nation or bloc of nations don't take matters into your own hands and protect your borders and people, very little will be done by the AU to help you when you are in need. In fact, the AU wouldn't bring much difference to that problem. My biggest problem with AU has to do with their stance on interventions. Did you know that the AU forces don't really fight in wars unless attacked? Let me explain how they operate. The AU doesn't wage war like a country would. Instead, it deploys peace support operations, intervention missions, and counter-insurgency efforts, mostly to protect civilians, stabilize fragile states, or fight terrorism. So what happens is AU soldiers go in to provide protection for where civilian settlements are. And if in the process of providing the protection, there comes an attack on the settlement, that's when they defend the civilian settlement, ladies and gentlemen. So they are usually on the weight on the defense. Therefore, the militia groups that control territories in the countries the AU armies are located are not really combated so long as they don't move into civilian settlement. This is why AU soldiers may be in a country for decades and the situation wouldn't change, ladies and gentlemen, because they are brought in as a response army and not necessarily to initiate an offense. However, these militia groups, ladies and gentlemen, their intentions are clear: to take over territories by all means necessary, or by killing, exerting fear and terror on people until the people submits or are kidnapped for ransom, sometimes raped, or have their resources or livelihoods taken away from them and their villages burned. This is their mission. When a group such as these, which have some of the most evil missions you can ever think of, is coming against you, there is no room for negotiations. You don't sit back and wait for an attack before you go on the offense. You take the battle to them with all that you have until every one of them is totally annihilated. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why I say the AU needs to first dissolve and be reformed with new priorities, so that the countries who will not agree to these new standing orders shouldn't be included. I say this because many of the African presidents are directly in connection with the militia groups and these Islamic jihadist insurgencies. Many of the leadership of these countries are the same people who provide the militias or their groups the intel. Therefore, no matter the effort that is put in, nothing substantial or sustainable comes out. It's either we concentrate on forming regional blocks of 3 and 5 nations, or we restructure AU, because the AU as constructed now is incapable of solving any problem for the long term. The AES is so far proven to be even more effective than ECOWAS and AU in many ways. They have the autonomy to immediately tackle the problems they have as a region and not wait for a 54-member countries of AU or a 16-member country of ECOWAS to sit first. Every day the problems of African countries increases, and until the African Union finds an urgent need and a reason to regroup and restructure what their responsibilities will be, I suggest most countries consider doing what the Sahel region has done. Form your own small groups, build your own community security, and take care of your group's problems. And this proposal is not something new on this platform, ladies and gentlemen. I started talking about this from the very first videos I used to make some 2 years ago, even before Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso decided to join forces. You can look it up on my platform at one of the videos titled African Powerhouse That Can Be. African Powerhouse That Can Be. Check it out. The more I research into what AU is about and how they handle issues of terrorism in Africa, the more I'm petrified over the future of this continent. From 2017 to now, more than 5,000 people have been killed by an insurgent group called Al-Sunna wa Jamaa, or called ISIS Mozambique, which doesn't get the needed attention in African news. 5,000 of them dead. This group is linked to ISIS and have displaced more than 1 million people in Mozambique. They engage in crimes like mass beheadings, kidnappings, and the destruction of villages. They want to seize the whole of the northern province of Mozambique in cities like Cabo Delgado, which is rich in natural gas, to finance their operations. Ladies and gentlemen, Mozambique had elections last year, October, and a new president was elected. This new president, President Daniel Francisco Chapo, has a lot of work to do for a country that is consistently pounded by insurgent attacks or natural disasters. A lot of natural disasters happening there. In 2019, they were hit by a cyclone by name Cyclone Idai, which killed more than 1,000 people. And in 2023, got hit by another cyclone called Cyclone Freddy. But that's just by the way. The main story for this video has to do with how underfunded and unequipped and unprepared AU is when it comes to conflict management in Africa. And I am encouraging the countries in Africa to consider forming their own cliques and blocks for their own protection, because for as long as the West is involved with the AU and the Middle East is also involved with the AU, plus the US is funding operations of extremist groups in Africa, our safest bet will be when we take matters into our own hands. Ladies and gentlemen, this must be seriously considered until the AU reconvenes and re-strategizes to meet the times that we are in. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for taking time to watch this one. And please don't hesitate to send us an email if there is any particular topic you would want us to look into. Tuntum Network is here to stay and we'll work hand in hand with you. We'll love your support if you have one. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks, and I'll see you in the next one. Be sure to subscribe and click on the notification bell for more of my videos. It is bye-bye for now.